Hey, how's it going everyone? Welcome back to another video. Now, in today's video, we're going to be making drum and bass in the style of Atmos. Now, if you've never heard of Atmos, make sure you go and check out his tracks because he has some absolutely ridiculous tunes. They all have this kind of grotty frog style bass going on. It's a very unique style that you only hear it with him. I mean, you can hear influences from other artists, but yeah, it's very unique to Atmos. Now, as always, if you want to grab the project file for this video, make sure you check the link in the description, and you can also go and join my Patreon there for loads of other cool production and DJing related content. And make sure you check the link below for one-to-one production lessons as well. But yeah, without any further ado, let's hop into FL. So here we are inside of FL as always, and we've just set the BPM to 175 like we usually do with these kind of tracks. Now the first thing we're going to lay down is the drums. So first of all, I've just grabbed this kick sample we can take a listen to here. Nice and simple. And you can see here I've just adjusted the out and turned it up to about 25% just because it was kind of a bit too thuddy before. There was a bit too much decay in the tail of the kick for what I wanted. But yeah, we've just kind of adjusted that, and we can make a basic kick pattern like the typical kind of thing we'd have in drum and bass. I mean, often you kind of either have the kick on the first beat of each bar, or you're going to have the kick on the first beat of the bar and just here as well, like this. And that's the kick pattern we're going for today's track. Next up, we're going to grab some claps. So we're actually going to layer up two different claps on top of each other. So first of all, we've got this clap. As you can hear, a really short, snappy clap. We're actually just going to select all of these and add a slight fade because there's a little bit of a click at the end and we don't want that. And then we can layer up our other clap as well. And if we take a listen to just the claps individually, you can hear how they kind of layer up together. And we also want to add a fade for this clap as well, because if you take a look here, you can see I've turned the out up to about 75% and the trim all the way up. And sometimes doing that, I mean, it's what we want to kind of reduce the decay of the clap, but it can also introduce like a weird clicking sound at the end. So yeah, we just selected them all and added that little fade, and that will solve that problem. And then next up, we just need to add in some hats. So first of all, got this main clap sample here. And what we can do is we can make a basic pattern with these hats. But in order to do that, you can see I've just added a fade there just for good measure. We actually are going to have like an offbeat clap as well. A hat, sorry. So what we're going to do is if we just copy that across, and then we're going to go to make unique. And then we can make this quite a bit quieter just using the clip gain there. If we just duplicate those across, and I reckon we can make these ones a little bit quieter as well. And that's working nicely together. Now we've got the main drum beat going. We just want to add a short break at the end of each bit because that's very typical of an Atmos style track. So if we just duplicate all these drums across to there, and then you can see I've just got this drum break that I've just cut up like this. And yeah, that's basically how the drums are going. Now let's add some processing and see how they sound when we've processed them all together. So as you can see here, I've just gone to and routed all of these drums to mixer tracks. And if we take a look in here, you can see we've got them all assigned just here and all routed to this drum bus. So if we go through what we've got on each channel one by one, I mean, first of all, easiest, we've not got anything on the kick, just a bit of leveling. And then on the first clap, first of all, we've got some EQ. So we're just kind of taking off some of the unwanted low end on there. And we also just have a bit of reverb going on as well. And then on the second clap, we just got a very similar, very aggressive low end cut. Then no processing on the hats. And then for the drum break, we also don't have any processing at the moment. We might add a low end cut on later on, but I don't think it really needs it, particularly at the moment. And then on the drum bus, we've got saturation knob first of all, which if you've never used it, I use it a lot in these videos. It's a great free plugin. So we're just adding some saturation with that. And then we also just have fruity fast distort to beef up the drums a bit, add some fatness. And all together it should sound something like this. Now you can see we've got this channel called Break 1, and that's for another drum break that we're going to add a little bit later on. So now that we've got the drums sorted, let's move on to the main basses. So as we often do, we're going to be working inside Serum for this bass. And first of all, we're just going to head into digital, and we're going to grab this wavetable called FM, and we can whack this down 2 octaves. Actually sounds kind of cool just like that, to be fair. You could definitely use that as some kind of garage bass or something. But for this, we're going to turn the wavetable position up to about here, I reckon. And you can hear it just beefs everything up a lot. Then we can make our main LFO shape. So if we drag the volume all the way down, and then if we just assign the LFO to that, and we're going to set this to trigger mode, and we're going to have it on 1/8 triplets, if I can even drag the thing there. And then we can just make an LFO shape for it, which should look something like this. And then we've got a sound like this. And we can also assign this to the wavetable position. Just gives it a subtle bit more movement. Obviously, that's something that you can mess around with the position off and how much you're modulating it as well. Next up, we're actually going to turn on oscillator B, but we're going to turn the level all the way down, and we can also turn the phase randomization down for both as well, because we're going to be using this just for FM, so we don't want the actual sound coming through. We're just going to use it to modulate oscillator A. So we're going to go into analog, and we're going to grab MSPW, and we can turn this up 2 octaves, and we are going to turn the wavetable position up to about there, and we're also going to modulate it with LFO1, something like that. And then we can turn on the FM from B on here. And just get a little bit more crispiness to the sound and add some subtle harmonics as well. Now we're going to go in with one of the main bits of this sound that's going to kind of like add the main screech. So in the filter section, we're going to go into normal, and we're going to select high 24. And we're also going to turn on the key tracking mode, which means that it will kind of open or close more depending on if we play a higher or a lower note like this, as you can see. And then we can set the cutoff position to about here. We're going to crank the resonance, absolutely crank it. And you can hear it gives it kind of that strange noise. And then that's everything inside of this window, so let's move on to the effects section. So first of all, we're going to grab our hyperdimension, and we're just going to turn the mix down somewhere around there. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell at the minute, but it will get more obvious when we distort it. I found, like, if you got these stereo effects on here, for some reason the stereo-ness becomes even more apparent when you distort it loads. But yeah, we're going to be fairly subtle with it. And we're also going to have chorus as well in a minute, so that's going to add some stereo too. Next up, we can grab an EQ. We're just going to set this to the low cut mode. We can drag the Q down as well, so we don't have that bump in there. Just cutting off some of the low end. I mean, there's not loads, but it's just kind of cleaning it up a bit before we distort it. And that means that we can grab the distortion next, and we're going to set this to diode 2 and literally just crank it to 100%. And now you can hear the sound kind of starting to come alive a bit. Next up, we're going to grab our chorus. We can turn that up to there, and then we're going to turn the mix down to about there, and we can also just turn the low pass filter up just a little bit. And you can hear it's kind of adding a little bit of stereo and just some like background noise as well. I don't really know how to describe the extra bits you get from the chorus sound, but yeah, I think it sounds pretty cool. And then we can grab a delay. We're going to whack that up to there. We can turn off the BPM because we don't need it to be synced to the BPM, but we're going to turn on the link, and we're going to turn this to about 24. And it just gives it that kind of lasery sound as well. And then finally for the effects in here, I'm going to grab a compressor and just add a little bit of gain. And there you go, that's everything that we need to do inside of Serum, so let's have a look at the external effects inside of FL Studio. And one thing I should mention as well, before we move on to everything else actually, is if you want to change kind of the tone of the sound, one of the best ways to do it is with the cutoff on this filter. So I found that around there before kind of gave me the best sound, so we're going to keep it around that position for the time being. And then in terms of effects in the mixer, first of all, we have a fruity fast distort, once again, just distorting the sound. So if I turn off those, you can hear it's really kind of bringing it out quite a bit. Then we've got an EQ, just simply cutting off some of the low end because we're going to layer a sub underneath. Then we've got a reverb that I was having a mess around with, but I much preferred it without the reverb actually. And then we also have a kick sidechain, which is just simply fruity limiter with the kick sidechain to it. Nothing too fancy going on there. Now we made the main bass, but of course we need a sub bass to layer underneath that. So let's do that right now in a fresh instance of Serum. So first of all, we're going to go ahead and grab analog BD sign, and we can turn the wavetable position all the way up and whack this down 2 octaves. to get it nice and low. Then we're just going to make a shape like this on LFO1. Yeah, around there should work. And just turn this to envelope mode. We can leave everything else where it is. And we're just going to assign this to the coarse pitch on here and set it to go one way. So to do that, I just held Shift and Option or Alt. It might be slightly different if you're on Windows. Actually, I think it should be the same for that. But you can hear it gives it that cool bump at the start of the sound. And you can just drag this blue thing to kind of adjust how much it's affecting it and how much of a bump it's giving. But yeah, that's everything inside of this window, so let's move on to the effects. So the effects for this sound are pretty simple. First of all, we just have some distortion with diode 1, and we're just going to turn this up to about there. Already getting ridiculous. Then we're going to grab our filter and we can whack that up there, leave it on MG low 6, and we can turn the cutoff up to about there, and we're also going to turn up the drive to about there. And obviously that's made it quite a bit louder, but now we're going to add in a compressor. Set this to multiband mode, which, I mean, it's kind of ruined some of the sub there, but what we're actually going to do, turn down the high and mid bands all the way and crank the low band all the way up. And it gives you that ridiculous sounding bass. And then the only other bass that we need for this track at the moment, I mean, obviously you can go in and add more variations and stuff, but it's just this one, which is a variation on the main bass. So I've just cloned it, but we've just adjusted this LFO, set it to envelope mode, set it to quarter notes, and also adjusted the cutoff on here to give you a slightly different sound. So if we just compare the two, and it just, yeah, it's a variation on the main bass, which we're going to use within the main pattern to kind of break things up a bit. And I nearly forgot to mention, for the sub bass, the only processing we have on there is a kick sidechain. So nice and simple, aggressive kick sidechain, obviously, because we don't want the kick and the sub to clash with each other. But yeah, we don't need anything else outside of Serum, just this kick sidechain, and obviously we've leveled it a bit as well. Now, I might have said that that was the only other bass that we needed, but I forgot about this one. We're also going to add in a Respace just to kind of break things up a bit, but as you can see, it's very simple. So if I just talk you through how I made this very quickly, we've got both of the default waves going here, both down 2 octaves, and we've set the fine tune to plus 35 on this one, minus 35 on this one, and then just turned on the portamento, set it to always, and set it to 100. And then yeah, everything else is just exactly the same as where you find it by default. And then we've just got an EQ with this high cut going with the Q with the bump there as well, and just slightly taken off some of the low end, not much though. And we've cranked the high clip distortion, we've got some chorus in there as well, and also a filter just to slightly tame the top end. A nice gritty Respace. Now that we've got all those basses, let's go ahead and make a main bass pattern. So this is the main bass pattern that I ended up using for this track. So if we go through one by one, first of all, we have the main bass, that the first bass that I showed you is just playing this. And now this gap might sound kind of weird, but when we bring in the second bass, it's kind of like a call and response. And also you might notice as well, the subs are playing D, but the basses are on A. Now, it sounded right to me doing it like this, and I think it's because of the way the resonance is working on these filters on the main basses. It kind of makes it sound a bit like it's playing a different note to what you actually play in the piano roll. So I would advise you to use your ears for these basses to make sure that it sounds right. But yeah, if we whack the sub underneath, you'll hear everything starts to come alive. And then finally we just got this Respace on this last bit. And yeah, it's working really well together. Now we can just duplicate this along, and the only other thing that I mentioned that I was going to add in to show you this kind of style is another drum break. So let's go and grab that, and then we're basically there. So I've just used this drum break that I found. Let's disable the effects first so you can hear it without the effects. Lovely sounding drum break, and then with the effects it sounds like this. Nice and clean. So for the effects, we just very simply have a low end cut and also a transient shaper. So it's kind of squeezing the sustain and the pump, emphasizing the transients a bit. And yeah, it just kind of tidies everything up a bit, as do these side chains from the kick and the claps. And if we listen to all of the drums together, without the basses, you can kind of hear more precisely what's going on. And with the basses, and it just adds like a nice layer of variation. But yeah, that's everything for today's video. As I said, if you want to grab the project file for this video, make sure you check the link in the description, and make sure you go and check out my Patreon for loads of cool production stuff and also a bunch of dubs and other cool stuff, and also check the link in the description for one-to-one production lessons. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.